The new $200 million Masters of the Universe just hit theaters, but its cinematic DNA traces back to a chaotic 1987 film. In the original cartoon, Orko was the lifeblood of the show. In 1987, hovering meant constant wires, complex practical effects, and blue screen work on every single frame. On an unraveling budget, that was a financial suicide mission. So, they built a physical replacement, Gwildor, a character who could walk, touch props, and stand in with a scene without costing thousands of dollars per second. Gwildor absorbed Orko's entire narrative role, becoming the creator of the cosmic key. He didn't have Orko's whimsical magic, he had the gritty ingenuity of a locksmith and a weird obsession with Earth's fast food. Kids in the theater were collectively looking at this guy thinking, who's this weirdly textured leprechaun? And what did he do in my favorite floating wizard? And yet, despite the missing characters and the jarring leap from Eternia to Earth, a lot of us watched the heck out of that VHS tape until it practically unspooled. Before production began, the studio hired the ultimate weapon to design the film, Ralph McQuarrie. If you don't know the name, he's the conceptual genius who single-handedly designed Darth Vader, the Stormtroopers. Essentially, the original Star Wars trilogy. McQuarrie started sketching a vast mythic version of Eternia that looked like a cosmic opera. Then the phone rang. Steven Spielberg was producing Cocoon, and McQuarrie's contract pulled him away instantly. The production had to pivot on a dime, leaving behind a fragmentary blueprint of a masterpiece that we never got to see.
How do you feel? I'm feeling a little hungry.
Director Gary Goddard tried to fill that gap himself. His early drafts kept the story locked on a mythic Eternia, and he even tried to dedicate the film to Jack Kirby. The studio said no to that one too. With their master designer gone and their director's vision blocked, they leaned entirely on a rising action star to carry the movie, unknowingly dropping him into a 5-month living nightmare. Dolph Lundgren came off of Rocky IV as Ivan Drago, 6'5", physically flawless, and a genuine martial artist. On paper, he was the perfect action figure come to life. In reality, he openly admitted the shoot was an absolute unmitigated nightmare. He endured 5 grueling months of filming, with 2 entirely at night. The heavy leather armor trapped agonizing heat, and the schedule moved way too fast for him to actually act. Basically, they turned a 6'5" Swedish martial artist into a human sous vide machine. Plus, the camera had this bizarre obsession with aggressive, lingering close-ups on Dolph's chest. Unintentionally hilarious. Absolutely. You see, He-Man wasn't written like a human. He was written like a corporate brand. Stand there, look big, and pose. It was so intense that Dolph actually turned down the sequel while he was still on set filming the first one. Yet, he still did almost all of his own stunts. He absorbed the physical damage for a studio that he didn't trust on a schedule that was already collapsing. Frankly, how do you leave a guy like that out of a modern cameo? But the creative casualties weren't just the people. Some were the rules the studio imposed, rules so absurd that they accidentally rewrote the entire story. Mattel owned He-Man, and they had one absolute rule. The most powerful warrior in the universe could not kill a living being on screen. No blood, no casualties, not even by accident. Realistically, this left the filmmakers with a massive problem. They needed a war, but they couldn't have a body count. Their solution? Make the entire enemy force mechanical. Every single soldier Skeletor commands is a robot. When you watch the film, look closely at the black armor. It's intentionally designed with high-gloss plastic to look completely synthetic under the studio lights. The movie never explains why a dark god uses a robotic army. The answer wasn't in the lore, it was in a corporate licensing meeting. Cut to the 2026 film. With a PG-13 rating, Jared Leto's Skeletor has a lethal freedom Frank Langella could only dream of. 39 years later, the legal department finally stepped out of the script's way. But long before the first camera even rolled, The filmmakers had already found a way around an even more difficult problem by bringing in a secret weapon whom nobody in the audience knew to look for. The man playing Blade, Skeletor's deadly swordmaster, wasn't just a character actor. He was a real-world master swordsman and fight choreographer named Anthony DeLongis. And when the stunt team realized how complex the bladed combat needed to be, they handed him the reins and said, "You train Dolph." But the real bottleneck hit during the final duel. Frank Langella gave Skeletor incredible theatrical presence, but the brutal high-speed sword combat required elite physical conditioning inside heavy restrictive armor. So the man who taught He-Man how to fight put on the skull mask and became the physical body of Skeletor for the climax. DeLongis is on both sides of that final blade. The most iconic fight in the film was entirely choreographed and performed by one single man. But while DeLongis was saving the action, the director was fighting a losing battle against the studio, and losing on a much bigger scale than anyone watching the film ever would have realized. Director Gary Goddard didn't care about selling plastic toys. He wanted to pay homage to the legendary comic artist Jack Kirby. He wanted the cosmic scale of the new gods, massive geometric shapes, bold framing, and villains that felt like ancient forces of nature. Goddard's early drafts kept the story locked on a sprawling mythic Eternia. He even tried to formally dedicate the film to Kirby, but the studio flatly said
I'm
no.
not going to tell you the executives' names, but I got this call one day, and I had said in an earlier conversation with them, guys, go see what action movies are right now. You want to do an action movie.
Watch the movie carefully and look for the sudden shifts in environment. Every time the camera reaches for something grand, like the towering throne room of Grayskull, it abruptly cuts to a bleak, cheap parking lot in Whittier, California. You are looking directly at the exact moment the money ran out. Fast forward to today. The 2026 film finally gets a $200 million budget to build a world that Goddard was denied. But corporate cutting didn't just hurt the director, it completely derailed a massive marketing stunt, forcing the crew to invent a bizarre new character on the spot for a very confused kid. During production, Mattel ran a massive nationwide contest where the grand prize was a role in the live-action movie. A 13-year-old kid named Richard Sponder won the ticket. He showed up on set, ready to step into his favorite universe, but nobody had actually written a character for him. The production was bleeding money, and schedules were razor tight. They couldn't just stop the cameras for a contest winner, so Goddard ordered a character invented entirely on the spot. They threw the kid into makeup, gave him a prosthetic snout, and shoved him into the background. Pig Boy. No backstory, no lines, no purpose. Just a strange, small creature handing Skeletor his staff of power. The studio machine had absolutely nothing prepared, so they invented a pig in 45 minutes and kept moving, which turned out to be exactly how they handled the castle too. Except that time, they didn't invent anything, they just started throwing it away. Canon Films wasn't just struggling, they were actively collapsing in real time. They were funding too many films at once, and Masters of the Universe was draining their remaining cash. It got so bad that mid-shoot, the money men walked onto the soundstage and physically started tearing down the Castle Grayskull set to save on staging costs. The crew wasn't dressing a set anymore, they were scavenging it. Only a few physical sections were ever completed, the throne and a couple of walkways. Everything else you see on screen is pure darkness, tight camera angles, and matte paintings on glass. The entire plot of the movie is about defending Castle Grayskull from being destroyed. In reality, by the time He-Man raises his sword in the final act, the fortress was already in a dumpster outside the studio. And the man who trained the hero and became the villain? It's time for the second half of that story, because the film's emotional climax is a complete illusion. Langella is spectacular as the voice and presence, but the physical combatant He-Man is striking is his own teacher. The audience thinks they're watching a clash of titans. In reality, they're watching one man performing a high-stakes dance with himself. And while the men were trading blows in the dark, one of the movie's main actresses was trapped in an absolute instrument of torture just to look threatening. On screen, Evelyn looks absolutely untouchable, but that iconic rigid posture wasn't an artistic choice. It was a physical necessity. Her outfit weighed a crushing 45 pounds of rigid fiberglass and metal. The heavy breastplate dug into actress Meg Foster's skin, leaving deep bruises. Turning her head too fast caused intense pain, and sitting down between takes was completely impossible.
After all this time, Grayskull is ours.
What reads as absolute villainous control is actually a performer trapped in a torturous shell, holding perfectly still just to survive the day. Look closely at her eyes and her close-ups. Those piercing pale blue irises aren't special effects or contact lenses. That is Meg Foster's natural gaze, staring through 45 pounds of agonizing costume. Honestly, she and Frank Langella completely own their roles, giving 100% to characters who could have easily been total jokes. I hope someone warned Alison Brie before she took over the role for the new film. Before we hit the final five, including Courtney Cox's secret debut and the post-credits scene that beat Marvel to the punch, did you know the castle was being torn down during filming? Subscribe if you're new. We break down the madness behind the camera. Frank Langella is a world-class classical stage actor who has played both Richard Nixon and Dracula. He agreed to play a cartoon villain in a rubber skull for one simple reason. His young son loved He-Man and begged him to do it. But Langella didn't treat it like it was just a cheap paycheck. He treated it like it was Shakespeare. The intricate makeup took over 3 grueling hours every morning, and to keep the illusion alive, he stayed in character all day, wandering the set as a terrifying warlord. But let's be honest, Frank didn't just chew the scenery, he digested the entire set. He went full Emperor Palpatine meets cosmic Shakespeare, and he single-handedly saved the movie from the bargain bin. Pay attention to his monologues. He later stated that the heavy rubber mask gave him a rare artistic freedom. Because his real face was hidden, he could be as operatic, grand, and theatrical as he wanted. The most haunting, dedicated performance in the movie came from a man doing a favor for his kid. 39 years later, Jared Leto takes on the exact same role. Leto is famous for his extreme method acting, but Langella did it out of pure theatrical discipline. Which skull do you think is more intimidating?
I, Skeletor, am master of the universe.
But Langella wasn't the only future icon on this set. A young actress was about to make her big screen debut, completely unaware that she would one day rule 90s television. Before Friends, before Monica Geller, and before Scream, Courtney Cox's very first feature film role was Masters of the Universe. She played Julie Winston, the ordinary Earth teenager who serves as the audience's anchor when alien warriors land in suburban California. Her job in this script was incredibly difficult. She had to sell genuine grounded grief about her parents' deaths, while a glowing alien tuning fork powered up in the background. She completely pulls it off. I don't know. The chaos of a collapsing production usually breaks young actors, but Cox delivered something real inside the madness.
Look, I'm never gonna let you up, so you may as well just go away.
Look, just give me a chance to...
Hey, do you need to get in? Here you go.
No, baby!
But while Cox was perfectly nailing her lines, the studio was actively plotting to erase the main star's voice from the entire film. He-Man is supposed to have a booming, confident voice of pure cinematic legend, but in 1987, Dolph Lundgren had a heavy Swedish accent and very limited English fluency. The studio executives completely panicked and immediately planned to dub over his entire performance with an anonymous American voice actor in post-production. Reportedly, Sylvester Stallone visited the set and explicitly warned the producers that erasing a star's distinct voice was a massive mistake. Dolph had legally negotiated the right to re-record his own dialogue, so he worked tirelessly with a vocal coach while executing brutal physical stunts in heavy armor. In the end, the corporate dubbing plan didn't die because of a creative epiphany. It died because the studio ran out of time and money before the hard deadline. Because of that budget collapse, He-Man got to keep his natural voice, sounding slightly off-world and foreign, which for an alien prince is exactly right. And that absolute collapse of time is nothing compared to what happened after the movie wrapped up, because a catastrophic bankruptcy forced a director to rewrite an entire sequel over a single weekend. The ending of the 1987 film explicitly teases a sequel. Skeletor rises from the boiling slime, looks at the camera, and vows to return. That wasn't fan service.
I'll be back.
It was a concrete corporate strategy. Canon had already built costumes and sets for a sequel titled Masters of the Universe 2, Cyborg. Dolph had already said no, so they were ready to introduce a brand new He-Man. Then, Canon completely collapsed financially. The Mattel licenses were pulled instantly, leaving the physical sets in North Carolina completely abandoned. What happened next was pure, frantic survival. Director Albert Pyun had exactly 1 weekend to write a brand new script from scratch that could still use those exact same costumes and set before the entire investment was written off as a total loss. He did it. The result? Cyborg, released in 1989, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah, seriously. The He-Man sequel was aggressively repurposed into a post-apocalyptic martial arts film over a single weekend. But even with the sequel stolen away, the absolute peak of the production's madness comes down to a tiny physical object that nearly stopped the original movie dead in its tracks. The Cosmic Key is the central plot device of the movie, a beautiful ethereal instrument that opens portals anywhere in the galaxy. On set, it was a mechanical disaster.
Alright, here goes.
The legendary special effects team built exactly 3 physical props for the entire shoot. They were so fragile and prone to cracking mid-take that the production had to assign full-time crew members to run emergency prop triage, quick patch the plastic, reset the wires, and pray to Christ that it survives the next take. But before the tape cuts to black, look at the architectural blueprint this movie left behind. Decades before Nick Fury walked into Tony Stark's living room, Skeletor was already staring into the camera and making a promise. The formula was the same. The difference was that Canon ran out of money before they could keep it. A $22 million film that went $5 million over budget shot a castle that was already in a dumpster fire and accidentally left behind the exact post-credits formula that runs Hollywood today. Now, 39 years later, a massive $200 million modern version finally brings Goddard's full, uncompromised vision to the screen. But whether the new one works or not, the flawed, chaotic 1987 original planted the mythology deep enough into the culture to survive the collapse of the studio that built it. Now, if you want to see what happens when a director takes the exact obsession with cinematic survival to a terrifying real-world extreme, check out this next video to find out how Mel Gibson dragged a crew into a punishing rainforest to create the raw, unfiltered madness of Apocalypto.